a podcast about amazing people from an incredible state. Join Mike Broomhead for Amazing Arizonans, presented by Resolution Copper. Copper is essential to Arizona's economy and to America's future. Learn more at resolutioncopper.com.
Another episode of Amazing Arizonans. We have just trying to find the best stories from our Grand Canyon state, and I can't wait to share this one with you. Her name is Barbara Barrett. Secretary of the Air Force was one of the titles you've held.
Yes, that's right.
Can you talk a little bit about that? Because the implementation and the creation of the Space Force and your role in all of that is just something that future generations are going to talk about.
Well, you know, it's been a long time since there's been a new military service. All but the Air Force and Space Force existed during the time of George Washington. The Army, Navy, and Marines. 250th anniversary had just been celebrated of the Army and the Navy. But in 1947, we created the Air Force out of what had been the Army Air Corps, and the Army Air Forces. And now, in December of 2019, the Congress, with bipartisan vote, passed the law, and the president signed into law the creation of the United States Space Force, a fifth military service. So the Army, Navy, Air Force, Marines, Space Force, and Coast Guard are the defenders of America. People don't think about space. When you do stop and think about it, we're dependent upon space every day.
And it increases. The dependency increases so fast.
It's remarkable. I believe that never in the history of mankind has any invention changed more lives, more significantly, more quickly than the global positioning system has. Everybody uses it every day.
Right.
Almost everybody in the world uses it at some point in their lives. It's a remarkable thing, and it's only been invented about 30 years ago. It was finished. And remarkable thing is that now that the satellites are operational, only 10 people on a shift in Colorado operate the entire system. It is the source of the blue dot on your telephone, but also so much more that people depend upon.
Isn't it remarkable I grew up in Southwest Florida on the Gulf, so everybody had boats, and we used that Lowrance system. That was the most forward technology there was. And then as the advancement became with GPS, it was an incredible, I would say, convenience for many people. Yeah. Now it has become such a necessity. I mean, we rely on it. Recently, we had the breakdown with Amazon, with the web services. That's right. And it showed a little picture of what happens when you interrupt that and how we're not necessarily prepared and how dependent we've become.
You know, that's exactly. So that you've just made the case for the Space Force.
Yeah.
Because we depend upon the GPS system. And that's how we guide our airplanes. That's how we guide our boats. That's how we guide our tractors in the fields in the Midwest. Everybody depends upon it. Our taxi. I came here by taxi. Okay. I came over in Waymo, and everything is guided by GPS. But
doesn't the Waymo freak you out a little bit?
I kind of like it. I really do like it. It's great. But that's
okay. Sorry to interrupt. They freak me out a little bit.
Yeah, it still does when I see, I'm comfortable in it. When I see one and I'm a pedestrian, I wonder, does it really see me?
I had friends visiting Phoenix from where I grew up. They happened to be here on business, and we got together and I took them to dinner. And we pulled up next to a Waymo. They couldn't believe it because we're used to seeing them now.
Yeah.
A driverless car, they were blown away.
Yeah.
Sorry we got off track, but I just think that's remarkable.
But the point on GPS is that my predecessor as Secretary of the Air Force said, it's like we built a glass house before we thought about stones. We now have this GPS system upon which we depend, and it's vulnerable. Mm-hmm. And it was that the entire world depended upon our GPS system.
Right.
But now the Chinese have an alternative. They would like ours to be proven unreliable so that people would migrate to theirs. Mm-hmm. And they may not be as benevolent in their operation as what the United States is. So it's very important that we have a way of defending our assets in space. And previously, we haven't. We've just been assuming everyone uses space for benevolent purposes.
Right. And when you go back to the Reagan years where we were talking about protecting protecting us within the using space, it seems so far fetched to be able to have a system. And now when you look at the private companies that have rockets that are taking off and landing on the very same pad that they took off from, we have advanced in technology, but you're right, we don't have a system that's protecting what's out there.
We're vulnerable. You can see that they're dependent upon solar arrays. And if you interrupt the solar array, you stop their power. So so the satellite is depowered.
Right.
That disables it. You can redirect it. What if it were redirected to a different orbit? You could spoof it, and that's the most dangerous of all. What if your ATM, your credit card won't work at the gas pump,
right,
unless you have space. But if the evildoer were to decide to spoof their system and interrupt their signal and send a false signal that you don't have any money in your account anymore, or
right,
that you think of the ways that you could be damaged. It's scary.
Well, we've watched companies be held hostage to hackers on the earth, where they get into your system, they change everything, and they hold you hostage until you pay a ransom. Imagine not having the ability to interrupt that at all because of where it's located.
Exactly. And war has historically been killing people and breaking things, as they say in the vernacular. You don't need to do any of that if you can control space. You can disable our way of life. If an evildoer were to decide to disable the Americans, all you need to do is shut down America's access to space, and you have us on our knees. What would we pay to restore that? The enemy has figured that out, and we have figured out that they've figured it out.
Right.
So we have a Space Force now that is working to add protections. But whatever protection you add, they feel, it's a cat and mouse game. So you have to continue to upgrade the capabilities in order to preserve the benefits that we receive. It's
interesting you say that. I have a friend who works up at Embry-Riddle here, and their College of I'm trying to think of what the phrase is for it, but it's the next generation of people protecting the internet, and so it's intelligence,
cybersecurity, or something,
and intelligence, security and intelligence. Perfect. And so it's the next generation of doing that online. But in their labs, you can see actual hack attacks on the internet.
Yes,
and that's obviously what we're talking about here on the ground and protecting our systems. But if they don't need to do that, if they can attack it up there.
That's right. And it just stops it all, or it stops selectively, depending on how sophisticated they are.
So when this happened, when you were approached, can you walk us through what those conversations were like? When the president comes to you or the White House comes to you and says, "We would like you to take this role."
So I have worked in the government a number of times. I worked for President Reagan with the deregulation of the airlines, the Civil Aeronautics Board. So I've been in the government in that role. We closed the Civil Aeronautics Board, the first major federal agency to go out of business. I came home married my husband, who I met at the top of Squaw Peak, just right near here.
And you're an ASU person.
I'm an ASU undergraduate, graduate school, and law degree, and work a lot with ASU on a variety of things. Love the students, and it's really such a treat to see these young minds. But I came back and practiced law for briefly when the President Reagan asked me to come back again. The air traffic controllers had just walked out, and we were asked to rebuild the system using better technology, training people more expeditiously and more precisely for new technology. So I worked at the FAA, and then I was served as ambassador. So in 3 different major government roles, I was accustomed to one system by which you get recruited for these jobs. In this case, it was quite different. It was President Trump, and I was asked whether I would come in and serve as Secretary of the Air Force. And I said, no, I love what I do. I love living in Arizona. Got a new horse, got a new car, don't want to move to Washington, don't want to. And so eventually I was asked, I said no. A senator called and said, what would it take for you to say you would agree to consider it? And I said, no, I just don't want to. And then finally I was asked if I would talk to Ivanka Trump, whose work has been working with economic empowerment of women in developing nations especially. And I said, now that I'll do, because I had started a program here with Thunderbird for Afghan business women to help them improve their
Remarkable
economic
school.
Yeah, Thunderbird is phenomenal. And so I agreed to talk to Ivanka. And so I had an appointment to meet with her in the White House on Monday afternoon. And I got a call on the Thursday before that saying, oh, yes, and her father would like to see you right after that. So she walked me down to the Oval Office.
They roped you in.
And his first question was, do you want this job? And I said, no, Mr. President, I don't. I said, I'm a patriot. And if my country asks me to do something, I do it. But I'll help you find somebody. I'm not looking. I don't want to move to Washington. And then he asked me a bunch of other questions. And in the end, he put his hand across that big old Resolute desk that you see in the White House. And I shook his hand. And while I said, thank you, Mr. President, he said, oh, no, Barbara, not thank you. Congratulations. And he shook my hand, and 4 times he said, congratulations, and turned to a staff that was in the office and said, call the Secretary of Defense and tell him we have an Air Force Secretary and send her the paperwork. So I figured, okay, my country has asked me to do something. I will do it, and I'll do it to the best of my abilities, and I'll hope to be the best Secretary of the Air Force. And that mission was set up a Space Force, create a new service. And that was pretty exciting and real. I didn't know just what an extreme privilege it is to work with the men and women of the United States Air Force and Space Force, and for that matter, all of the services. These are great Americans.
And to be in Arizona, the connection with Luke Air Force Base and the F-16 pilots and now the F-35s, right. I've been privileged to go out and watch how they train and be around those planes and to see how hard these young men and women work to be the best in the world at what they do. To take that kind of dedication and that kind of education and transform it into the Space Force, what does that look like? What is the difference when you look at who qualifies for and what you're looking for in the Space Force? What is it they're looking for that's different?
Completely different talents. I'll tell you, the men and women that are flying those F-15s, F-15s fewer and fewer, but F-16s and F-35s, they are the best of the best of the best. They are race car drivers combined with the greatest of scientists and engineers. But the Space Force is a different... That's not the upper body strength requirement. That's not the physical requirement. I would say Stephen Hawking would be a welcome member of the Space Force. It's a brainiac's setting. It's a much more cerebral. The brain and brawn, both are required to be one of those fighter pilots. The brawn is not so much required for the Space Force people. We want them to be fit because we want them healthy, because we invest in these men and women. We want them healthy and we want them to love their jobs. But their job is not as physically demanding as it is for any of those pilots that you see at Luke or those airmen, those people that are preparing the jets for the pilots to be flying. Those are all physically demanding jobs.
When I looked at how demanding it was to be a pilot, I was part of the Honorary Commanders Program. They gave us a little bit of insight. This was back when it was the F-16s, but I've been out there with the F-35s. What I don't think the average American understands is how little time they spend flying in comparison to preparing for a mission and then debrief when the mission is over, even in training. The hours before, time in the air, and the hours after going back and making sure that they are perfect every time. Yeah. It's an incredible dedication to their craft.
And it's an unforgiving business. Space and aviation are unforgiving businesses. They're risking their lives every day. You know, Luke opens their doors every spring, or just about every spring, for Luke Days. Yep. And I think that anybody in the Valley that has the opportunity should get out there. It'll be in April or so, and get out and just meet some of those men and women. And they'll bring in other aircraft that are pretty interesting. Oh, yeah. The U-2 was there a couple years ago, and they bring in great aircraft. It's an opportunity for us to see this extraordinary gem that is on our western edge of our valley that is providing the best in the world at training for superstar pilots. And they're training pilots from not just the United States, but the Norwegians are there. I flew into Norway with couple of pilots on F-16 pilots on my wings. Those very pilots have just come here to be F-35 pilots and hope to come back to be squadron commanders of the F-35.
It's remarkable what they do when it comes to the transition with the Space Force and the creation of the Space Force. When the Space Force is at full capacity, what will it look like? How many people and what will it look like?
Well, it's going to change more than any of the other services change because it's based on technology. And the technology is changing every day and every year. So this year, it will be tens of thousands of people. In the future, it may be the largest force because if we do space well, we save the lives of all the rest of those folks, and they can do a better job. So space is determinative of the capabilities of the Navy, of the Army, of the Marines, and of the Air Force, and even the Coast Guard, as you were describing with your private boat in Florida. We're all dependent upon space. So space will increasingly be taking a bigger role, and the threats to our space assets will increasingly be severe.
So I want to go back. You've been involved in the Reagan administration on a couple of occasions. You've been an ambassador. You've done all these other jobs. Can you take us into how that happened? I mean, because it's got to be an amazing, not just accomplishment, but an honor to be asked to serve your country. But how does that happen where the President of the United States comes to you? What got you there?
You know, it's all because of Arizona. This is a great state. My dad had been a cowboy here in Arizona pre-World War II.
Oh, wow.
He joined the service, the Army, in Prescott to fight in World War II. He was hurt during the war. They put him in the hospital in Pennsylvania. I was born in Pennsylvania, but I was born hearing about this great state of Arizona. And so I came to ASU, and everything, my life changed. ASU was a great land of opportunity for me. At ASU, I was in the first class of interns at the state legislature. And at that, I got to see that women were playing leadership roles. The first woman to be the leader of any state house or Senate was Sandra Day O'Connor. And I got to see her in action. And that inspired me and set the course for me to say, okay, a law degree makes a big difference. So following her footsteps, I got a law degree. And the law degree opened additional doors. And I wrote the bill to create, the original bill to create the Arizona Department of Transportation. And that was during a reorganization of state government. And that was maybe the beginning. Then I closed a major federal agency at the CA. So I had a hand in the creation of the ADOT, and then closed the CAB, and now have founded the lead staff to found the Space Force. But it all started because of Arizona, ASU, and opportunity because Arizona, we don't think of ourselves in this way maybe, but Arizona is a great place for women. You know, we had a Supreme Court Chief Justice of our state Supreme Court in the 60s that was a woman, Lorna Lockwood. We had a woman member of Congress representing Arizona when we had 2 senators and 1 congressman. We didn't have enough population to have more than 1. And we had Isabel Greenway, who built the Arizona Inn, a woman representing us in Congress. And we gave women the right to vote sooner than any other state after we became a state. They wouldn't let us be a state if women had the vote. But as soon as we became a state, the very first election, women got the right to vote. And we almost always have more women in the legislature than just about any other state. On our record of 5 women governors sets a standard for any state in the union. And that 1990s version of the Fab Five, I think, was memorable. And it's a great place for women. I think that one extraordinary role model like Sandra O'Connor opens a lot of doors for women to see themselves in a different way. I grew up in the era of a woman could be a teacher, a secretary, or a nurse. And I guess I was especially, a transformative moment in my life was as a little kid. And my dad, I was sitting on a tractor. My dad was working on the tractor, and our neighbor, a teacher, looked up and said, "So Barbara, what do you want to be when you grow up?" And I went through the inventory of what my options were, and I had in my mind that I could be one of those 3, a teacher, a secretary, or a nurse. And I didn't know then that I'd pass out at the sight of ketchup.
Yeah.
So I said, I think I'll be a nurse. And my dad didn't turn around. He didn't look up. He didn't scold. He just said, why not a doctor? And that changed my perspective of what my opportunities were. And so I had Dad's permission to think about things other than the original three. And that was transformative.
So for you now to be one of those women of influence, you know, the Rose Moffords, the Jan Brewers, the Cindy McCains, the people that have been an influential women, that influencing young women as well. What does that mean to you to now be in that group?
Well, I don't know that I am, but
you are.
I have the privilege of seeing these young people at ASU and at Thunderbird and at Embry-Riddle and the younger kids at basis schools. And I think give these young people an education, give them opportunity, give them exposure to leaders and to challenges, and they will rise to the occasion.
Amen.
And I think we are blessed with a great group of up and comers, and we often beat ourselves up about the education system here, but we've worked a lot with basis schools.
Yeah.
And they just did the ranking of the top 100 schools in America. 11% of those top 100 schools are basis schools, and 11 out of 100 are schools that are headquartered here in Arizona.
When you look at the education system, but it's also about opportunity. As you said, as a young girl, you thought nurse was the ceiling, and your father changed your perspective.
Exactly.
You have to change the perspective for young women, because the fight for being in the military and the fight for those things are one thing, but to look at you and say, why not chase the dream of leading the organization and starting a brand new one, a brand new branch of the military? That's got to be inspirational. You have to have young women that approach you in that regard.
I love chatting with young women and hearing what their aspirations are, and in some cases, opening new ideas to the big world out there. I think that one of the things we've worked with at ASU is that at the Honors College, we want none of those graduates to walk across the stage with a new degree and not have had some exposure to a culture other than our own. Mm-hmm. We appreciate our own much more when we see what other cultures are. So getting exposure is one of the great privileges, and that's a part of what I think education should entail. So I think we have liberated girls a great deal, and much attention over the past 30 years has been given to that. And if I might say, I think there's recent literature that we need to pay attention to our boys too. We need to make sure we're not leaving young boys and young men behind. We need to make sure we inspire people, not necessarily by gender or by perspective, but let's help all young people elevate their sights and think about great opportunities and solving the great problems of our world. We have made extraordinary strides, and we have exceptional tools. And right here in the Valley, we're building more, but we still have challenges. We can make life better. We can include more. We can make this prosperity that many feel be a broader opportunity for others.
When you look at Arizona State University, when you were going there, and I drive Dr. Crow crazy with some of the things I say about when I moved here 30 years ago, it was known as such a party school. It had a reputation for that for a while. Yeah. He hates when I say that.
Yeah, that's my era.
But I do that lead in to what it's become and how it leads the world in innovation and the engineering program and what it's done to bring TSMC and other things to the Valley. The changes in the direction and the respect for Arizona State University, not to not diminish any of the other schools, but what they've done at Arizona State has nothing short of remarkable.
It's phenomenal. I give a lot of credit to Laddie Kaur, who did that capital campaign that laid the groundwork so that a school like Arizona State, a once known as party school and football school, could attract someone of the caliber of Michael Crow. But Laddie and Elva laid that groundwork. that brought in Michael Crow, who is one of the most transformative thinkers and leaders.
But to recognize
visionary.
how important that is.
Yeah.
You know, there had to be a lot of people in academia that saw the vision of Michael Crow and said,
Yeah, too much. Too hot to handle.
Yeah, that we don't want to, and yet to embrace it here.
Yeah.
And to see the changes in what's been built here, the foresight of the leaders that recruited him and brought him here, that's pretty remarkable.
Exactly. And then his foresight has taken us to places that would never have been accessible to this little school in the desert. And now massive school and massive. And his philosophy, he's rewriting the industry of education by restructuring it to think about upward mobility is what America is about. And academics are how we have historically had upward mobility for our people in America. And we shouldn't be figuring out how we can exclude people from that. We should be making that as broadly available as possible. That's Michael Crow's basic precept. And I think it's wonderful that he is shaking academia awake to say, aren't we about inclusiveness, about allowing people to get this education if it's what they'd like to do. We need non-university educated people as well, but and a very proper and noble goal it is to be in any of the trades and any of the fields.
That's where I came from, and I was never more proud of myself than when I became a contractor and a business owner, growing up in the trades and learning from tradesmen how to be in the trades. But at the same time, as I've gotten older, such a deep respect for the education system and the people that are the minds behind a TSMC or an Intel. When I moved here, Intel was such a forward-thinking company that was almost inconceivable what they were accomplishing and doing right here in the Valley. Yeah. And of all places in America, to be doing it in Arizona. Yeah. Pretty remarkable.
It's remarkable. And the impact of the semiconductor industry to Arizona, it's another of those brainiac kinds of fields where a lot of extraordinarily capable men and women have built this new technology, and now that's being employed across the country and around the world, all right here from Arizona. And much of it is a result of the talent pool that Arizona State University provides, along with the whole ecosystem of other academic settings, Thunderbird, Embry-Riddle, and now a lot of new universities that are enriching our fabric and making this an even more vibrant community. Yeah. It's very exciting to see.
Do you think, going back to the topic of what Arizona's had such strong, accomplished women ahead of their time, in many cases, do you think a lot of that has to do with the independence of Arizona, the agricultural background that your family came from? Because every family I've talked to that are multi-generation that goes back to agriculture, ranching and farming, it tends to, there's an independence and a will to accomplish, because you just can't say no. You have to, there is no, I don't feel like working today.
Exactly. It's a no excuses business. Aviation is an unforgiving business, and farming or ranching is a no excuses business. It doesn't matter if you don't feel well. It doesn't matter if you'd rather go and do something after school. You got to milk the cows. You got to. So I think that the agrarian roots are key. But I think also so many Arizonans are here from someplace else. And, it takes a gumption. There's a certain gumption that it takes, a word that we don't use much anymore, but to pick up and leave behind all what's familiar and move to a place that's unfamiliar. And Arizona's unfamiliar in a risky kind of way. If you have a flat tire in a remote place in the heat of the summer, your life is at risk. And a passerby wouldn't dream of passing you up and not stopping. In Arizona, people help each other. In Arizona, people come here and they've been in that uncomfortable position of not knowing what's the best school or where's the best gas station or how you get your dry cleaning done or how you live, how you get by, what's the church you should attend. So all of those things, it's unsettling. But people who are in Arizona, a disproportionate number have come from someplace else, have just enough adventure in them to pick up and move, have the gumption to not talk about it, but do it, and have that unsettling, that experience of being unsettled and being dependent upon others to some extent to be successful in this revised setting. And America offers that opportunity more maybe than many other countries. And I think Arizona is the picture of that gumption that America has in spades.
In 1992, I came out on vacation for 6 days, and I absolutely fell in love with everything you just said. And then in 1994, late 1994, I had an opportunity to make a life change. I packed everything I owned into one big duffel bag and as much money as I had, which wasn't much, and I drove across country in February of 1995. Never looked back, never regretted it, and it absolutely changed my life. And I have to tell you that if there was, I love what I do. If there was such a thing as the ambassador of Arizona, I'd take that job in a heartbeat.
Well, I'll arm wrestle you for it because I think it's one of the great. We live in a great state, and for so many reasons, and we don't much talk about it. We beat ourselves up about some of the low rankings we get in education, but look at the high rankings we get in education too. We need to keep getting better. We need to keep improving, and we need to be critical of ourselves on the things we can improve
and work together.
Yeah, exactly.
Because we have such differing opinions on what gets us to the goal. But you know as well as I do, without a team of people that are willing to listen as much as they want to talk.
And improve it.
Right.
Yeah, so somebody have the gumption or the initiative to put a proposal on the table and then welcome anybody got a better idea and either succeed, give me a different idea or make this one better. And if we're welcoming of that, I mean, think of the vision, the wisdom 100+ years ago when they built that water system that we count on for the Salt River project. They built dams for water that would that they would not get the benefit of, and their children would not get the benefit. But they built them. They put a huge expense and a great time commitment into building a dam system to capture the water so that the spring melt doesn't just all go to the ocean, and build a system that we depend upon today, and it meets our needs where we have not been rationing. We passed the Groundwater Act now 45 years ago to preserve our groundwater in sensitive areas. But we are living off of surface water predominantly because of the vision of those ancestors 100+ years ago.
And then the generations that followed when you have a Senator Kyle working on Central Arizona Project. Yeah, and then the forethought of where we could be going. Moving here 30 years ago, people laugh, like you would laugh at me when I talk about the great changes I've seen in the valley. But the changes I've seen are north of Bell Road. Whereas natives talk about what it was like here for generations before. But the vision of people that saw what it could be and prepared us, that we would not be where we are had they not prepared us. Like you said, the Salt River Project and others.
And they were building on what the natives had done, what the Tohono O'odham or the canals are along the same canal waterways that the original people, the Native Americans had done. So we all are benefiting from standing on the shoulders of those who've gone before. It's
interesting. In Florida, there's one tribe, and it's the Miccosukee Seminole, and there is a great relationship between the citizenry of the natives and of the American population. Arizona seems to have a unique relationship with its tribes. I've spent a lot of time in the Navajo Nation, and I'm just interested to get your perspective. The Native people and the history of the Native people in Arizona is remarkable. And when you get to know people and bring down some of the walls that we always, for whatever reason, we like to build them, it's an amazing culture across the different tribes and how different their cultures are, but how much we benefit from their history and their culture.
Yeah. And their sensitivity to the nature that they lived in and were simpatico with for ancient generations, and traditions that are based on, they didn't have the scientific research from a laboratory, but they had the historic credibility and understanding of it. We are benefited tremendously. I'm wearing Native American jewelry. I like to do whatever I can to support our Native American environment and community, and have people across the country and around the world see that it's not something of the movies. It's something of culture and historically significant to our ways.
Being in northern Arizona on the Navajo Nation, we were working in a little town called Kaibato, and we were working on a church, and one of the group in the church says, "I'm going to take you somewhere tomorrow." And they took us into the ribbon canyons, into the small canyons.
Yeah.
Not where the tourist areas were, but the great pride that our people are taking in the beauty of Arizona and the years of history that are there. It was almost a reverence to be with them there, and the great amount of pride and reverence they had for it added to the experience and not just the beauty of what you were seeing.
Yeah. Well, I am... have been a great fan of the wonderful artist Ed Mell.
Okay.
And he seemed to capture Arizona so well and allow people to have that in their living rooms, because he was able to capture through art the feeling of some of those northern Arizona locations.
So let's talk before we close it out. It's an odd question, I think, after everything you've done, but you don't seem to be someone in our first meeting that's done. What's next?
Oh, I love what I get to do. So I wish I were a little closer to done. I've just been serving on a couple of search committees for new CEOs. One of the great things for Arizona is that on December 7th, 1941, Pearl Harbor was bombed by the Japanese. And in that process, they sank the battleship Arizona, famously, and other battleships as well, but most famously and most relevant, they sank the battleship Arizona. Since that date, December 7th, 1941, there has not been a ship in the naval fleet named for our state. But the former Secretary of the Navy, Tom Modly, issued the edict that a new submarine is going to be named the USS Arizona. It is under construction right now, and I chair the USS Arizona Legacy Foundation, which is a community effort to work with the construction of that submarine to celebrate the new naming, to support the men and women that will be serving on that submarine, and to educate people about World War II and what happened at Pearl Harbor, and to revere those who lost their lives, the 1,177 men who went down with the USS Arizona at Pearl Harbor. So one of the things I'm working on right now is the USS Arizona Foundation Board, and working as we watch this submarine being built and prepare for its christening and commissioning as a part of the Navy fleet in the next several years.
That's remarkable.
It's a fun project.
It has to be for you, I guess, in your obviously being native to Arizona, really practically, right? I mean, being here for as long as you have, to be a part of continuing the legacy and the history of this great state. I think meeting people that are multi-generation from Arizona, they take great pride. I think we think about Texas, the Lone Star State, and the pride they take in being a Texan. Arizona's different.
We've got them beat.
You have them beat.
We have them beat.
You have them beat.
They're big and they're bold, but we've got, when it comes to quality, our measures will exceed, I think.
And the love of your history, keeping that history alive, I think Arizona's second to none.
You know, the more you get out and see the rest of the world, the more you realize just how great Arizona, and especially the Valley of the Sun and the mountains in our area are. And you know, last year I completed a project of going to all 63 of the national parks.
Oh wow!
And from the gates of the Arctic in Alaska to American Samoa, which is most of that is a national park, to the Dry Tortugas or the Virgin Islands, to Acadia in Maine. This is a great nation. But there's a disproportionate number of national parks in Arizona, and they just capture a small portion of the greatness of our state. We're very fortunate to live here. I can't say that it was as studied a decision as it deserves to be, but if I had done this study, it would be the place that would win.
Oh, absolutely.
Instead, I was just lucky and decided on it based on my dad's representation of how cool it was.
And mine was I came out on vacation and just fell in love, and 30 years later, I can't imagine living anywhere else. And I think that when I tell people, and then we've had a lot of the jokes are now, well, don't tell people.
Yeah.
Let's slow it down. But it's a remarkable place.
We can make it better. Let's keep working to make it better. Let's keep educate the young people so that they will have a hand in making it better. Let's work closely with our military men and women. We have Luke and Davis Monthan and Fort Huachuca and the Marine Naval Air Station at Yuma. We've got great military installations here, and our National Guard, and reserve folks. I mean, we have great assets, and what our duty as Arizonans that benefit from being here, our duty is to make it better, leave it better than we found it, and keep finding ways to improve opportunity here.
Well said. I really appreciate the time.
My pleasure.
As busy as you are, thank you for this.
My pleasure.
This is such a great project to tell Arizona stories. This is one of the most important ones we've ever told, so thank you.
My pleasure.
Now you know why it's called Amazing Arizonans. It's for this reason that we tell these great stories. I hope you watch more of these episodes.
Thanks for watching Amazing Arizonans, presented by Resolution Copper. Tap the button in the middle to subscribe to KTAR News.